There are ways to speak about these creative activities that seem very obscure because they have to be very obscure because we don't actually understand them. And to me, that's just being honest about it. I don't want to say we've got it all figured out. This helps your enzymes digest a banana. Like, I don't believe any of that stuff about these mental activities, these creative activities. And I don't know if it's healthy for you. Maybe it's unhealthy what we're doing, and we're doing it anyway. That could very much be the truth. I wouldn't stop. I've continued
Mm.
plenty of unhealthy things before, but I think that we have to stop finding secondary reasons to do these things. These are primary things in life.
Mm.
For me, anyway, it's I don't need tango to be good for my body. I don't need tango to be good for my intersocial skills. I don't need tango to be good for something else. I need tango to be good for tango.
I'm Liz Savachik, and this is Humans of Tango, where we explore what tango has to teach through the experiences of those who dance it. When I moved to Washington, D.C., after starting my tango journey in Montevideo, Uruguay, Jake Spatz was the tango human who first connected me with the DC tango community. Jake was already establishing himself as a teacher, organizer, and performer, while I was mourning the loss of my very first tango community back in Montevideo. Jake invited me to practice with him and assist his classes, a collaboration we sustained for about 6 years. I remember learning a lot in those years, but I didn't remember learning the quirky story of how Jake started dancing in Brooklyn, New York.
I was doing interviews for this biography, and I had an interview one afternoon that finished a little earlier than I planned. So I went to my friend's bar that was in my neighborhood, a few blocks away. I just sat down and had a beer, kind of went over my notes. And then eventually I look up, like some time had gone by. And I asked the bartender, I go, "Hey, why aren't any of my friends here? Like, where's everybody today?" And she goes, "Oh, you silly. It's Wednesday. Tonight's tango night. None of your friends are coming." And I go, "Oh man, I'm here on the wrong night." And she goes, "And here's the beer you just ordered." And I'm like, "Oh man, no, I'm stuck here. I can't even get up and leave."
Stuck with the
And
tango.
yeah, and there's this tiny little bar. And so the little lesson goes on behind me. It's just a couple people. So then after an hour, like the quote unquote milonga starts. The story really begins in this moment. I'm sitting there at the bar, still going over my notes. And there's these two girls standing at the bar, and they've each got a drink, and they're kind of like nursing their drinks but not really there for that. They're waiting to dance with the teacher who's dancing with somebody else, and that's the only people there to dance. And the rest of this small bar is virtually empty because, again, it's tango night, no one's there. I feel bad for these two women who are standing there waiting. And so I look up, and my friend ran the bar. I knew everybody there pretty well. I said, "Somebody teach me how to dance a little bit so I can help out." Right. And so as I say that, this guy walks in the door, and my friend Jed, who it was her bar, she goes, "Okay, Jake, this guy, I think his name was Derek." She goes, "Derek here is learn how to follow, so he'll teach you how to lead." I said, "Great." And I hop off the stool, walk over, and this guy very generously works with me for like almost an hour. To give context here, I have at this point in my life an aversion to dance. I hated dancing. I'd been thrown into it at different times in my life and always had a bad time. And so I would do things like this. I mean, I was doing this to help out if I could, but usually I would be in situations with dancing, and I would dance out of spite, right? Because I knew I was going to dislike it. I always disliked it, but it was just, I had not really done tango. And so this was basically like a way to cross it off the list and say, yeah, this one also I don't like. Um, Anyway, so this guy's working with me, telling me step to the side, and I step to the side. He goes, "No, no, no, really to the side." And I go, "Oh, like I'm on a chessboard." And he
Mm.
goes, "Yeah." I say, "Like side, like through my ear." And he goes, "Yeah." And so I did this step straight to the side, like razor sharp to the side. And in that moment, I was like, "Oh my God, that felt really good." I danced that night from, this the whole dance started around 9. And so this guy worked with me for about an hour. So I danced that night from 10 until 2 in the morning, 4 hours basically straight.
Wow.
So I sat down at 2 o'clock and there's my beer that I never finished. So I took a sip. I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing tango now. A friend of mine from that bar was a guy named Albert Garcon, he was a piano player. And so, word gets around in a small bar. And I think a couple of weeks later, I'm there and he goes, Jake, I heard that you started dancing tango. And I said, yeah, I think so. And he goes, that's great. I'm going to come in and I'm going to play the piano over there for you guys when you're dancing. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I'm
Oh
like,
my
cool.
God, you had live music from your
Yeah,
first
well, it
month?
turns out he grew up with tango music because his grandfather was friends with Gardel and one of Gardel's
As
guitarists.
in the legendary tango singer Carlos Gardel.
So he had it like in his blood. And he came in the first time with a stack of sheet music, like, loose. And he stuck it on the piano. And we used to just buy bottles of beer and put the bottles on the piano. And he would play like 45-minute sets. And so my early tango years, this is like my first 2 years, was basically dancing in this tiny little bar where we could fit, if there were the right three couples, we could fit three couples on the floor because we could kind of like fold around each other. So that's how I started, was in a really tiny space with no rules and somebody playing the piano that was sometimes in tune. So
Wow.
thing is that that entire place, I went back to it maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little more, with Dasha. We were visiting New York for some special event and we were staying in Brooklyn.
Dasha refers to Dasha Kripova, Jake's partner in life and tango, who you'll hear more about later.
And so we were driving home and I said, oh, you know what? I know these roads. Like, why don't we take a detour? Let's go have a drink at this place. And so we went to the old bar that back then when I was dancing there, and I used to run poetry readings there too. It was called Artland Bar. And I knew my friend had sold it like years before we went there. And so we went in there, and now it was like a whiskey bar or something. It was like completely remodeled. And we're sitting there at the corner of the bar, and Dasha is like, "Why are you looking at the room so much?" I'm like, "Because this is where I started dancing, and I it's even smaller than I remember." I was trying to actually see like on where the walls were to see if anything had like moved or if the bar had been put further out in the room, and nothing had really changed that much. It's just it was really small. So yeah, it was quite surprising. The thing is, I looked up that whole area several years ago now on Google Maps or something. The whole street is gone. The building's gone. Everything around it is gone. The whole block was like torn down and rebuilt. The neighborhood has some weird name now that didn't ever have. It was Williamsburg before. It was just the crappy part. And yeah, it's the whole thing is gone. So it's like that happens in, in some of the songs. Where's my old neighborhood? It's like, yeah, I've lived that.
Can you name like a song that really resonates with that experience that comes to mind?
Yeah, the probably classic one is like Tinta Roja. It starts off very, impressionistically. Basically, anything that's red is like in the lyrics, and the red I think he has in mind is this kind of like maroon color. Like it's actually the ink that I use because it was the ink that was sold in the pharmacies back then that a lot of people used for journaling. It's basically sepia is what we call it now, right? And it's the color of these old mail boxes that were there, and the color of the brick wall and stuff like that. And so this color is like all over the thing because why is it? It's like the whole verse is sepia tone basically. And then it hits the chorus, and the chorus is basically, "Where's my old neighborhood? You know, who took it away?"
¿Dónde estará mi arrabal? ¿Quién se llevó mi niñez? ¿En qué rincón luna
And
mía
that's a
volcán
big part of the experience of the early 20th century with a lot of urbanization, cities expanding and kind of going over the what was suburbs or what was outskirts before, and then the suburbs themselves developing into what we call them, suburbs now. They used to have dirt roads. Now they have subway stops and stuff like that. So that whole process is really something that I think is captured in the lyrics. we're almost so used to it now that it's hard to realize that that's a kind of unique thing in this era. It's not that things never happened before, but it's that around the time of the big immigration waves into the Americas, right? 1880 to 1920 is like kind of that big period. That's also the period when a lot of people were moving from the countryside into the cities. And so there's a lot of development in the cities. There was a lot of change. One thing that really bugs me about tango in a way nowadays is that with social media becoming such a presence, even if you're trying to avoid it, like I am most of the
Yeah.
time,
Yep.
you still have exposure to it. And when you have exposure to it, it's kind of easy to recognize the general tone of it, the general tenor of it, which is that it's a lot of marketing. It's a lot of positivity, a lot of up, happy, come do. It's hype, right? To put it in one syllable. To me, the whole thing about tango as an activity and as an experience, as a world, is that it was always not just a small subculture, but it was very much a counterculture.
Mm.
It was a way to not do the other things. And it's not that you're always making that statement when you do it, but it was part of it, especially in the revival era, which has now gone on longer than the original golden age. I never tire of pointing out. It's very much been that. It's a minority culture, as it were, right? So there's something about it that has that kind of edge. And to me, that's something that I really embrace because um, if I enjoyed mainstream culture, if I enjoyed all these other things that are out there to do, I wouldn't be doing tango. But the thing is, I don't enjoy those things. And so when they come in and they kind of, start to capture part of the tango world too,
Mainstream culture in this case being Instagram, basically, or YouTube.
It's not so much that. It's the message of it,
Mm.
right? Because it's all come, have a great time at this thing. And it's
Like the
like, no, I'm
consumption,
doing tango.
like turning the commodification, right? That the
Yeah,
social media forces you to commodify tango
yeah.
culture, basically.
Well, it's not only social media, and that's the thing that I was thinking about. When I started working as a teacher, as an organizer, I was helping out a lot of people. I basically worked with almost everybody in DC, I think, at one point or another. Tango had a different feeling, a different atmosphere because it was smaller. And a lot of us at the same time made an effort to grow the community, and it grew because there were a lot of us doing it at the same time, and everyone kind of did it and had a different contribution to the pot. And it was really beautiful to see it grow. But at the same time, it started to become more of a kind of consumerism. Before the community grew, there was much more a sense of a kind of cooperative culture. At a certain point, the tone shifted, and a lot of people noticed this because I talked to a lot of people at the time about it. This is going back, 15 years ago or so. And people started to talk about how tango was, we didn't have people that were dancers anymore. They were consumers. And there was an attitude of I came and paid my ticket and I'm coming to do this and get this out of it and go home. And that was kind of a jarring thing to see that that was the attitude and that was the prevailing attitude. And I guess it's just part of, community growth too. It's something that we all more or less rolled with because you have to. After all, what you're inviting is people to come in, but they come in and they bring something in that we weren't expecting. So there was almost a different effort to kind of make sure that we could keep things authentic, at least what we thought was authentic. One of the things that appeals to me in tango that we've already discussed is this aspect of nostalgia. Because part of being dissatisfied with the culture at large is remembering that it wasn't that way before, which we've just been talking about in different ways. But that's a big part of the experience. I think that in order to learn to dance tango, it's not even dancing. In order to learn to be a tango dancer, is what I mean. You have to lose something in tango. You have to learn enough that you have something to forget, and you have to forget it. And then when you remember it again, when it comes back to you as a memory, then you really have learned it. Everybody I know that has been dancing a while has quit a few times, come back a few times, right? Come and go. You have to have part of that process so that there's something buried in it for you to come back to. And I think that that's what maybe other activities require too, but because it's actually part of what we're dancing to when the songs come on, it seems to be a little bit more present as part of the tango experience. It's kind of like you cross the line into the dance floor. I used to say this at Eastern Market all the time. So there's that black border around the floor. And I said, you cross that line and you entered this world now. So the baggage from the other world doesn't come across that line. It's becoming the other in a way. It's living on the flip side of the record. And I think to me, all these things matter because that's actually what you're choosing to do as an activity. We're using music from before, customs from before. No matter, how you do it, it's still something that doesn't fit into everyday life. Sometimes I think about being on the dance floor and you're in the embrace there and you're basically in a kind of temporary makeshift shelter from the rest of the world. Maybe this is a recurring theme and what I'm talking about, right? Is like us versus the world. But I feel like that is definitely part of, the intimacy and the closeness of the embrace in tango is very much about that. It's finding something that's a little bit of home in the storm. So that chaos of the outer world, right, that's being shut out or is being momentarily controlled is also part of the dance. For me, this was also something that happened very early because I started dancing, like I said, in June 2001. And a few months later, there was September 11th, 2001. So the world I was in Brooklyn and came crashing down um, around us. And so, to go and make sure everyone was okay, if you could find everyone, to make sure, see who's still alive was a thing that you did at that time. And for the months afterward, it was really a feeling of like living in a bomb shelter in a way. And people would get together to see the news broadcast to see what crazy things were going to happen with the political situation, things like that. You got together to dance after that, and it was literally that feeling of you're embracing together. It's a moment of sanity almost, or a moment of safety against a world that was truly unknown, that was truly chaotic. So for me, that's something that stuck with me in tango as an experience, and this kind of feeling that it's in a way a consolation or a kind of escape, but not in the fantasy way, right? And hype is selling you the fantasy. I think that tango is actually trying to allow you to find the reality. There are all these images in the tango lyrics that are kind of harrowing in a way. Like, there's this one song. I'm trying to remember exactly which one it is because there's two songs I was confused about this. It's basically like the image of the harbor in the fog. I guess it's Niebla del Riachuelo. This describing, the ships that are basically retired. The old hulks there and they're floating and they're moored forever. They're not going to sail anymore. This image is kind of haunting because that's your harbor, right? That's your haven. Um, is the graveyard.
Han de zarpar, torvo cementerio de las naves que al morir sueñan sin embargo que hacia el mar han de partir. Niebla del riachuelo amarrado al
First of all, it doesn't need to be anything more, right? It doesn't need to be an allegory, but it serves as an allegory too for the kind of the dreams and the maybe the aspirations and things that haven't worked out. That's something that you can talk about in tango. That's what that melancholy allows you to admit and to authenticate in a way that you can't do in mainstream culture in the same way you definitely can't do it on social media, right? Because you seem like you're crazy. or like you need therapy. But you don't always need therapy. Sometimes all we need is honesty. What I'm saying is it's not necessarily an illness that needs treatment. Sometimes it's just very healthy to be able to, to say that things didn't work. In fact, I think the sickness is to need to always say that things are going well. I had more ambitions as a dancer in the sense of as a performer in the past. And I don't know if I was really cut out for it, but I learned to kind of refocus on things that I knew and that I was seeing, getting feedback from the world that I was cut out for, which was like organizing and more than running events in a business sense, it was more of like steering the ship in a community, right? One among many. Um, but doing that, I think, was something that I learned to commit to more, and I had a lot of, I think, backup from Dasha to do that as well. When you recognize that somebody really believes in you, and that somebody shares your vision, right? Because commitment and love is not just like you're looking at each other; it's like you're standing by each other and looking down the same road, and you're going to travel that road together. And traveling on one road, two people involves some collisions in the this part of the head. That's unavoidable. And like I said, it's productive. That's course correction. And many of us anyway are at this stage of life now where we have young ones crawling around. And for us, we look forward very much to bringing up Greta
That's Dasha and Jake's daughter.
in the tango world, and hopefully her taking to tango. For me, tango is something that is very naturally a family activity because I think of tango as as a real family. That's its authenticity in a way. That's why it bothers me when things get too much about hype or too much about consumerism. And I know everyone wants to succeed. Everyone, you do want to hype up some stuff because you want to share it. But I feel like sometimes the tone that's more of a warmth and a real invitation has to be predicated on everyone feeling like they belong to it rather than trying to sell somebody the ticket to go somewhere or the ticket to have a certain status. When you belong, you don't need the status. And I think that's sometimes why, to bring in one other element for a moment, because it does matter, there is a snobbery and a cliquishness in tango, as in a lot of activities. But I think it's emergent in a way from the experience itself, because that is a way of belonging too. It's just a way of belonging that overgrows a little bit and it becomes something that shuts out other people so they don't belong,
Mm.
right? And I sometimes think that it really does come from a kind of insecurity. And I have seen some people melt their armor that was snobbish, right? That was more forbidding and actually become the one that's welcoming new people in, whereas before they used to be the one that was pushing people away. And I think that transformation happens when that person feels secure enough, they feel like they belong enough in the tango
Mm.
that they can actually let down their guard. They don't have to be uh, top shelf only, right? Because
Hmm.
what does that mean at the end of the day, right? If you only dance with these people, it means that your status is dependent on those people, not on you,
Hmm.
right? That's what you're getting. It's not when you turn it around, it becomes what you're giving. All of that disappears.
At the time of recording, I haven't seen Jake and Dasha in person since before the COVID-19 pandemic. First, I moved with my family to Spain, then they moved to Philadelphia. I asked Jake about that transition and what their tango lives are like these days.
I enjoy living here in Philadelphia more than I enjoyed living in DC. But I dearly miss the tango community that I helped to build and that Dasha really helped me to build. I mean, when we started really working together, like really as the hosts, plural, at Eastern Market,
Eastern Market was the location and name of the popular DC Milonga founded by Bill Griffiths, where Jake started as house teacher and became the main organizer in 2013.
that was a big movement forward for us personally. because we were really working together on something, and we were both really invested in making that work. Our lives rotated around Thursday nights. So to not have that anymore, or rather, it's not only not having it, it's feeling that it was taken away. Because in some senses, that's what the pandemic was for a lot of people, not just us, but for practically everybody, right? It felt like the big rug pull. But I think for us moving here, we started to do tango kind of right away. It's a much smaller community. I still feel kind of like we're in community builder mode in a way. Although it's not the same thing anymore because there's not 20 years of momentum behind tango as an enterprise. I know places specifically in DC
Mm.
that I could point to as examples, but I know plenty of places elsewhere too where there was an event there because there had been an event there for a long time.
Hmm. So the
We stayed
connections
up.
were made, the prices had been agreed to, like there was all of that history that made things smoother.
Yeah, it's not even that the terms were static, it's that the habit was there. The
Yeah.
habit had built up a momentum to the degree that, you go out on a Saturday night and you want to stay out till 1, 2 in the morning. Like one of the universals post-COVID is that everyone wants to go home earlier.
Hmm.
And I'm an insomniac. I'm up until 4 in the morning anyway, and I want to go home earlier. you
Wow.
know? It's like I know it's real if I'm the one going, I think it's too late if it's midnight.
Ah.
The thing is that the habit of being out dancing that late is just
Hmm.
the the shoreline washed away. And also there was a sense when, before we moved, when things started to open up again, I remember talking to some friends of mine in DC. And I said, I don't know, the thing is, this might not be right, but I feel like if we return and reopen everything just as it was, we fail because we've already done it. We were forced to stop it. And that's closure, whether you like it or not. And to refuse to accept that and to just want to go back, to me feels like it's the ultimate way to like not accept the truth, to not take the hit that was unavoidable. What could we do next was where I started to think about things. I made some big plans, they didn't pan out, but I started to think about things in different ways. I wanted to brainstorm and see if could I come up with anything that was different, anything that was better. And I'm still thinking that way. I have a whole class model, or I guess learning model that I'm looking forward to rolling out. That's trying something I haven't done before. It's more of an open concept, like dojo style approach to things, which is kind of what I've always wanted to do in a way with tango, is not have this structure that puts an expectation on all parties involved that maybe doesn't belong there, but maybe have people come in and know what drills to work on. They know what they need to do, and you're there to guide them. And then there's a more organized part, and then it's back to more training rather than what I kind of pejoratively call the babysitting model. By babysitting model, I mean that the sense that people show up and you do everything for them. I've talked about this with Andres actually years ago. I remember talking about almost the same words from Mariana Galassi and with Cecilia Gonzalez.
Andres Amarisha, Mariana Galassi, and Cecilia Gonzalez are Argentine tango teachers and performers who have collaborated with and influenced Jake over the years, and who you can learn more about in the show notes.
If you wanted tango, you had to figure out how to get it as a student. Was something that motivated you and made you, develop your eye, it developed your memory, it developed your ability to take apart and put back together what you were learning. And so when you went from teacher to teacher to teacher, you had to do that all the time. You always had to synthesize what you were doing. That's the word Mariana Galassi used that stuck with me to say, well, I learned this thing from that person and this thing from that person, but they're both going to have to converge in me. So you have to have that creative approach as a dancer and as any kind of artist. There was something that came up 2 years ago. I don't remember if this was like a tango professional speaking in a way as though like they invented everything they know, or if
Mm-hmm.
this was a more casual statement of somebody saying
Mm.
like, "Oh, I figured this out." But I just realized, I don't want to think that way myself. I want to make sure I don't think that way myself. So I opened my notebook and I started writing just a list of all the people that I've learned from, or all the influences I've had. That's what it was. Somebody said, I don't have any influences. And I'm like, yeah, of course you don't.
Wow.
Um, yeah, like what a ridiculous thing to say. To say you're not copying someone, okay, that's a virtue. To say you have no influences means like, what planet do you live on? You know? So I wrote down a list of all my influences. That's what it was. And I thought originally that it was going to be like just the core list. And the more I wrote them, I went filled 2 pages, in longhand in single space. And I was really feeling good as I was doing all of that because it was for me about paying tribute, even in my notebook where no one else is going to ever see it, to a lot of people. I put down specific things. And I mean, you're in there. We worked together for a long time. And I feel like anytime that I have an experience where I really learn something with another person, to me, that's very meaningful. Remembering the person is remembering the learning too. I think that the phrases in the dance, right? The lines in the dance, the poetry of the dance are a register of memory. It's not only a thing you can learn to do in a recipe that you can follow, but it's also a recording of other people who've done it. And when I was writing those names down in my notebook, and with a little framing it in a way of putting there what the experience really was, or what I think it was very similar to just to putting together dance figures, one after another. It's like, yeah, this is a figure, this is a figure. Post COVID, one thing that I have done with Cecilia a few times is that we've included in not only in our classes, but sometimes like if we're performing together, a moment here, a moment there, tributes to dancers that have passed away that were meaningful to one of us, or usually to both of us. And sometimes it's just little things we remember, but the dance has become for me a record in a way that's not just metaphorical. I realized it's actually how we learn, it's how we remember things. And I started using this in my classes this past semester at UPenn for the Tango Club. I would teach like a forward ocho, and then I would construct a figure with a forward ocho. And sometimes it would actually be kind of something I liked that I wouldn't teach ordinarily. But I ended up with this whole collection of like, 8 count or 16 count figures that became a memory of what I taught that semester. And to me, that is a thing for me in tango that's a little bit new. It's a little bit more like composing. And it's not really related to performance. It's really just dancing, right? But dancing with a different awareness of how you're doing it, and of actually that it is a way of collecting experience and kind of preserving experience.
Here's to paying tribute and keeping it real, and to making havens in the storm together. Thank you, Jake. And thanks to Pablo Estigarribia, whose recording of Milonguero Viejo, composed by Carlos Di Sarli in tribute to Osvaldo Fresedo, accompanies this episode. Thanks also to La Chicana for the recording of Tinta Roja by Sebastián Piana with lyrics by Cátulo Castillo, and to Orquesta Típica Misteriosa Buenos Aires for the recording of Niebla de Riachuelo by Juan Carlos Cobian with lyrics by Enrique Cadícamo.